Hell, it's about time.
Hello and welcome back, all my commanders, cerebrates, and executors to the StarCraft Lorecast, the podcast where we dive into the lore, stories, and the interesting and fun facts about the StarCraft universe. I'm your host, Jeremy, otherwise known as John Fire, and I hope you're ready to dive back in to this favorite franchise of ours. Now, first off, I'd like to apologize for not uploading for a couple weeks. Work's been a bit of a bother for me. It's been pretty busy where I'm at currently. But I finally was able to set aside some time and come in and talk to you all about StarCraft, our favorite, my favorite RTS franchise, definitely. And I hope it's a big part of your guys', well, not that big of a part, but I hope it is a interesting part of your guys' lives that you like to sit down and listen to, learning listening and learning about the stories set in the StarCraft series. So, but today we're going to still continue on with our coverage of the major factions that had an impact on the story of StarCraft as a whole. Now, do you all like to keep a secret? Do you like to wage battle in the dark? To be felt and not seen, not heard either? Do you like to keep your individuality and not have others dictate how you live? Well, if so, then congratulations. You might be a Nerazim, or commonly referred to as the Dark Templar. That's right, folks. Today we'll be going over the second of the protoss factions that we currently know of and are aware of within the StarCraft universe. So, starting this off, let's want to read you something that I'd like to think states what the Dark Templar or the Nerazim are. Alone, it is said that those of our kind suffer, separated from the glory of the Khalai. But none of us are ever truly alone, for our warrior hearts are bound by honor, tradition. Battle, it's waged in the name of the many, the brave, who generation after generation choose the mantle of Dark Templar. Spoken by our favorite Dark Templar, the Dark Prelate of Zeratul. So, exactly who are the Nerazim? Well, the Nerazim, or the Dark Templar, as they are known to outsiders, are a number of protoss tribes who shun the Khala itself. The Nerazim use a verdant green as their tribal color, while platinum is the dominant color on the field of battle. The Nerazim have sharper features than the Khalai and perceive things quite differently from them. The Nerazim will often cut off their psionic appendages and would develop the use of special clamps to control the energy bleed. Now, these are like, if you see the regular protoss, the Khalai protoss, they have the long braided like uh, tendril for some reason, I can't freaking think of what it's called, but they'll sever that and put an energy bleed clamp on it because their species kind of evolved with that, or may have been the Xel'Naga that put it in them. We don't know. But the style of these clamps has changed over time. They can additionally be used for Khalai protoss who lost their own psionic appendages by accident or in battle, particularly with Desert. Nerazim technology is similar enough to IR technology that these protoss can intuit how to use the technology, and the Nerazim are masters of time manipulation. Hoo-hoo, pretty advanced. The Nerazim, alone or in groups, have sought Xel'Naga artifacts throughout their uh, existence as a faction within the Protoss race as a whole. Nerazim eyes are predominantly green, though purples, blues, and oranges have been observed. Nerazim warriors have undergone centuries of discipline and training. Terrans who possess a limited number of technologies that are capable of dealing with these warriors, or basically humans don't have enough technology or the not mindset don't have as much capability of fighting against the Dark Templars. Nerazim warriors also utilize a fluid combat style that cannot be mimicked exactly by Terrans. So, going into their culture, driven by individuality and a thirst for knowledge, the Nerazim developed along a very different path than the Khalai. Nerazim work in smaller groups than the Khalai and are far more individualistic. With a less monolithic culture, each Nerazim is encouraged to forge their own path, and they believe that fostering this attitude leads to their great successes. They remain willful and often fiercely independent, with their closest allegiance being first to the clannish warrior bands and then to the Nerazim as a whole, the great tribe to which all Nerazim belong. By their nature, the Nerazim are a diverse group of freethinkers motivated by their regard for one another and their tribal bonds rather than abstract notions of authority. As such, many Nerazim develop skills outside their chosen professions, unlike in the strict caste system of the Khalai. Examples include some of their engineers also having knowledge in combat. Different clans also take great pains to distinguish themselves through variation in their weapons, armor, markings, and their type of dress. Regardless of clan, reputation and personal responsibility are paramount in the eyes of any Nerazim. Individuals must always be accountable for their actions. So, which means if you mess up, it's on you. You need to take control of your actions and accept responsibility for what you've done. If you failed or if you've succeeded, it's on you. As a result, deeds rather than words act as the Dark Templar's guide. Individual clans can be prone to feuding and rivalry, but they are quick to band together against a common threat, such as that presented by the Zerg. Family is important to the Nerazim, and the family unit is part of their social structure. They are less demonstrative than the Khalai when it comes to display of emotions and are more introspective. The Nerazim sever their nerve cords in order to fully separate themselves from the Khala. That's what it was called. Nerve cord, the psionic appendage or braid-like thing that comes down from, their heads, basically. Sever that, disconnects them from the Khala. All is good. To prevent energy bleed, the Nerazim will put clamps on the cut cords. This severing leads to a weakness where void energy channeled through the exposed nerve cords can knock a Nerazim unconscious, serving as a non-lethal way to incapacitate a Nerazim warrior. The Nerazim maintain the same system of writing as the Khalai. Unlike the Khalai, however, female Nerazim are able to become figures of authority. Whereas when we last spoke about the protoss themselves, the Conclave had set up a system where females weren't really in a position of authority or power in deciding how the protoss would, how the Khalai would function. Some Khalai phrases are exclusive to the Nerazim's vocabulary, while others that are also used by the Khalai have a different meaning to the Nerazim than their counterparts. The Selnaga retain the position of gods in Nerazim religion. They consider anything that taints the void to be unholy. Funerary rites are conducted for the deceased. Some, if not all Nerazim, appear to store their dead in mausoleums and crypts. Before officially becoming a Dark Templar, one undergoes a shadow walk. And only one leader of the Nerazim can exist at a time. Now, what is the shadow walk specifically? Well, so just like any warrior culture who says before you can become a member of a warrior caste or whatnot, you have to do a sort of trial type thing. Each country, each old nation on Earth that was primarily warrior like would do this. I mean, what is it? Some Native American tribes would, before you could become a true man, you'd have to go on a successful hunt or something. Then you had Spartans who did all their different combat training and whatnot. But the Shadow Walk, from the words of matriarch Forazun, it is our most sacred rite of passage. The initiate stands alone. Members of the tribe strike against them from the shadows. If they endure, they become a shadow hunter, a true Dark Templar. Or basically, within the Shadow Walk, the Nerazim protoss must pass it before officially becoming a Dark Templar. It requires the aspirant to walk down a valley and keep only to the shadows, out of which Dark Templar will spring unexpectedly to assault him or her. Those who make it to the end of the valley without being incapacitated pass the test. Those who have followed the path of the Khala will find it more difficult to complete this trial. By the Great War, only two individuals who have followed Cass's philosophy have passed, one of which was Tassadar, managing to pass the test through combining his Templar energies with those that Seratol had taught him. 6 years later, Matriarch Forazon was of the opinion that Hierarch Arcanus had completed the Shadow Walk trial. He fought to defend the Salnada Temple of Shakur's phase prison against the Serid alone, that he had proven his place as a Dark Templar. So, like I said, it's a ritualistic trial type thing for the Nerazim protoss to do before they can take the mantle of Dark Templar. Just like how, if you think about it, a knight cannot become an official knight until he is sworn in by the king or knighted by a king. So, kind of similar. But with the Nerazim, their psionic abilities are a little bit different than the Khalai. Nerazim were taught to hide from the conclave by the powerful Templar Adun. This ability has been described as bending light and merging with the shadows. Nerazim wield the energies of the void. These energies are harmful to the Zerg Cerebrates and the Overmind due to the similarities of the cosmic energies they wield. The Dark Templar consider their powers to be the true gifts of the Protoss and consider the Khala to be diluted and narrowed by the former leaders of the Protoss and the robbing of individuality. Their own powers are considered wider. This power protects Nerazim from Zerg infestation, just like the Khalai. However, those who walk the path of the void do so with diligence and reverence, for they know full well the dangers lurking in the shadows of the void. Nerazim are cut off from the Preservers, who utilize the Khalai to store memories. Because of this, they have no Preservers of their own, and their memories cannot be accessed by those Preservers. As they are severed from the Khala, communicating with the Nerazim via telepathy requires Kalani to be mentally communicated, rather than the essence of thoughts being expressed. A group of Protoss survivors stranded on Nair, the Talarim, or we'll go into them later, were cut off from the Khala and developed abilities similar to those of the Nerazim. All Nerazim additionally possess a shadow essence. This essence can be fused into the Stalker. So, a lot of information thrown there. I plan to do a video on exactly what the void is and how it affects psionic abilities. Additionally, with doing that along with a video on an episode on the Khalai itself. Now, going over their history, their origins. Going over a quick quote. As impossible as it may seem, there are some among us who would destroy everything we have sought to build over the last millennium. They question the Khala. They maintain that the right of the individual takes priority over the good of the whole. Some have even resorted to the extreme measure of self-mutilation in order to sever their connection to the Khala. Or, was spoken by Judicator Cortanor when he was first talking about the Dark Templar. So, a few rogue tribes will refuse to submit to the Khala, believing that their individual identities would be erased to further promote the rule of the ruling Judicator caste. Although they were not hostile or militant, they believed that the communal agenda of the Conclave would be the eventual doom of the Protoss. The rogues held no ill will toward their brethren and attempted to live their lives unnoticed as best as they could. Nonetheless, their existence was known to the Conclave. They were joined further by individuals from other tribes who did not follow their kin's embrace of the Khala. More Nerazim would stem from the Sargosh tribe than any other Khalai tribe. Unfortunately, during this time of peace and whatnot, where they would live separately from their fellow Protoss, from their fellow Khalai Protoss, but within Ire, this would unfortunately kind of breakdown, you know, unfortunately. Because approximately 1,000 years before the Great War, the Conclave, under leadership of Judicator Cortanol, had collected records on the locations of these rogues. The Conclave would order the executor Adun to report to the Conclave so they could tell him about this new threat, which they believed could cause a new Eon of strife. Adun was given Razaga, a young prisoner, to question. He brought her to the citadel of the executor so the other Templar could question her. The Conclave would give him their information so he could quietly track down the rogues, abduct them, and execute them. Adun, though, was unable to bring himself to execute these rogues. He would transmit fake recordings of the executions to the Conclave and would hide the rogues, even teaching them how to cloak. The rogues ended up developing these abilities far more quickly than Adun could teach them. Unfortunately, the rogues, while still learning their powers, lacked the discipline of the Khala. They would inadvertently unleash psionic storms, which would spiral out of control on Ire. The Conclave would discover the corpses of dead rogues, only to realize these rogues had been depicted in the execution recordings. So, yeah, you have a group of people who want to live away from what they believe is something that would cause an end of their people and would get rid of their own individuality. And you have a an executor or someone who was sent to kill these rogues. Well, would look at them and realize these guys aren't rogues. They're just people trying to live out the life that they want to live out, and thus would help them out as much as he could. Unfortunately, like I just spoke, when these dead rogues were discovered after the psionic storms, all would not be well. The Conclave could neither punish Adun nor slay the rogues, as he would force them to publicly admit the existence of the rogues. The Conclave would decide to banish the wayward rogues from Ire forever on an ancient but functional Selnaga ship, along with other Protoss ships which Adun insisted they be allowed to take with them. However, last-minute squabbling threatened the rogues. Cortanul would attack Adun, prompting a psychic battle between the rogues and the Conclave, and Adun would fear the rogues might accidentally create psionic storms again. Adun would thus create a blue mist with a combination of Khala and strange energies, which covered and protected the rogues. However, the power would cause Adun to burn out like a star. They would then take on the name of Nerazim to signify they were now a new tribe of the Protoss, united within their exile. So, like any hero story, the hero ends up sacrificing himself for those who cannot defend themselves, to try and save them from both themselves and an enemy, prompting them to wish to eliminate them. That's why they have the saying within the Protoss, in Taro Adun. So, but moving on, shortly afterwards, it was discovered that the exiles had stolen the powerful Khalai crystal from the Sargas tribe and had taken it with them. The Nerazim would ceremoniously cut off their nerve cords to show their disdain for the Conclave and the Judicator caste. This act would cut them off from the Khala, forcing them to draw their psionic energies from the void. Forevermore, they would be known as the Dark Templar, as they had forsaken the Khala's light. After leaving Ire, they adopted the name Nerazim to give name to the new tribe that had been formed from the exiles. As their legend would spread across Ire, sparking the imaginations of many young Protoss, this tale worked to incriminate them. Although they were hunted and feared by their own brethren, the Nerazim would never abandon their love of Ire and would work to safeguard it in any way they secretly could. During this time, the creation of the Dark Archon would be banned. During their exile from Ire, the Nerazim were free to experiment with new technologies. They would develop their fleet of corsairs, vessels designed to defend themselves as they had traveled through the stars. On board the Zelnaga ship they had been exiled on, the Nerazim were able to gain access to new knowledge, which would help them to create warp blades. Now, the first step on the Dark Templar's journey was the moon of Elna. Elna, E-H-L-N-A, Elna. That's what I'm going with. Which they discovered shortly after leaving Ire. It had a Zelnaga crafted warp gate, so the exiled protoss would stay. They discovered the moon had a combination of energies which altered Keydarian crystals, making them quite efficient at storing memories. Without preservers, the Dark Templar had no way to store their memories, so they would use this technological means to do so instead. After more than 2 centuries, the Dark Templar would depart, but some would remain to operate a shrine, the Alice Real, where the memories could be extracted from pilgrims and stored. Numerous vessels would also remain behind. Upon finding a Selnaga temple on Shakuras, the Dark Templar would decide to remain there to study it. Struggling to adapt to the harsh and nearly lightless environment due to Protoss needing to feed on light, the rogue tribes would alter their skills and even their biology to cope. The abilities that Adun had taught them served them well on their adapted homeworld, and their culture would thus flourish. Some tribes would live in other star systems and aboard other small ships. During this time, both the Khalai and Nerazim fought a running conflict with one another. In the year 2497, Nerazim terrorists would attack a conclave tower using the celebration of Kasmas. Praetor Phoenix would fight through the terrorists and would slay them with their own war blades. Eventually, Razagal, aged 1045 in the year 2500, and one of the few Dark Templar who was old enough to clearly remember Ire, would become matriarch of the Dark Templar. She would rule for approximately 500 years before the outbreak of the Brood War. Now, this happens a lot in real life. You'd have people who break away from a culture or faction, separated, and would not need to follow the strict rules and restrictions of the culture they came from, and would thus develop new technology, new culture, new processes, and would either flourish and thrive or die and you know not be heard from again. This is basically what happened to the Nerazim. They left the Khalai, they utilized new technologies they would craft, and they would flourish on the world of Shakuras. Now, let's be honest, anybody would want to do that. Find a home and flourish in it. And the Nerazim did just that. But unfortunately, that's not the end of this history. Because then you have the Great War and the coming of the Zerg. The Dark Templar would learn of the Zerg from discovering the Zerg's probes, and in 2500, the Dark Prelate Zeratul would be drawn to Char by his powerful psionic call. On Char, he would encounter Executor Tassadar, who would overcome his prejudices. The Dark Templar were greatly concerned about the Zerg and would choose to test themselves in battle against small bands of Zerg on Char. The Zerg would prove frighteningly resilient and numerous, and so the Dark Templar would bring the Khalis to Char so that they might try to wield its energies to get them. While Tassadar diverted Kerrigan, Zeratul would kill Zaz and become temporarily linked with the Overmind. Once the Overmind silence would be broken, though, Zeratul and Tassadar's armies would be trapped by a Cerebrid and would thus be devastated by Sarah Kerrigan, losing the Khalis crystal in the process. Zeratul and his surviving Dark Templar were later rescued by Tassadar in an installation and were convinced to accompany him to Ire and save the planet from the Zerg. On Ire, Zeratul and his Dark Templar would help Tassadar's followers destroy the heart of the Conclave. However, Tassadar would surrender, having grown wary of the sight of his people killing each other, and Zeratul would slip away into chaos. But he would return in time to rescue Tassadar from Judicator Aldaris. Zeratul would infiltrate the primary Zerg hive clusters and would assassinate 2 Cerebrids. The Conclave would see the results of this and admitted via Eldaris they were wrong about the Dark Templar. Zeratul would participate in the assault on the Overmind, which would end when Tassadar would channel Dark Templar energies to the hull of the Gantrathor and would crash it into Overmind, destroying it. And as we all know, these Dark Templar energies was the Void. Unfortunately, the Zerg would overrun Ire, and the Nerazim would thus invite or accept the remaining Khalai protoss on Shakur's. So, moving along into the Brood War, Zeratul would band together with Aldaris, Praetor Phoenix, and Commander Jim Raynor in order to unite and lead the Khalai survivors. He offered to shelter them on Shakuras and would find them passage to the warp gate. On Shakuras, the Dark Templar would rescue the refugees when they were ambushed by Hydralisks. Razagal would welcome the Khalai to Shakuras and would order the death of two Cerebrates who had infested the temple grounds. In response to the heavy anti-air defenses built by the Zerg, the Dark Templar would deploy their own Corsair ships to compensate, allowing for Protoss ground forces to make landfall at the temple and for the Dark Templar to assassinate the Cerebrates. It was then that Kerrigan would arrive, and Razagal, who had secretly been mentally enslaved by Kerrigan, asked the Protoss to accept Kerrigan's assistance. While Kerrigan and Zeratul would assist Praetor Artanis and the Executor in securing the Uraj and Kali crystals, Aldaris would begin an open revolt against Razakal, who in turn would order his death. Zeratul felt, though, that something was wrong with Razagal, who was normally gentle, but followed those orders, even authorizing the creation of Dark Archons to match Aldaris' force. Kerrigan would kill Aldaris before he could reveal Razagal's secret, and Zeratul would banish her from Shakuras. Razakal claimed that she was worried by recent events. With her encouragement, Zeratul would carry the Khalis to the temple, while Ataris carried the Uraj. They channeled the temple's energies, resulting in an explosion which obliterated the Zerg on Shakuras. But that wouldn't be all, because then you'd have... So, that's what we know of during the Brood War of the Dark Templar. More, of course, does occur within it. But, because you'd also have, or Reg, God dang it, I hate these names. Ulrasage's rebellion. Yeah, Ulrasage's rebellion. Okay, I got that. I got that now. So, a combined Templar and Dark Templar force would leave Shakur to conduct a mission on Ire. The rescue of a number of wounded Protoss warriors would be abandoned in stasis cells on the world. The Protoss would have to fight their way past Zerg colonies to do so. But when they reached the stasis cells, a quartet of Dark Templar would appear and destroy two of them, killing the Protoss within. They would be forced to surrender before they could destroy the third cell, though. These Dark Templars would be led by Ulrasaj, who hated the thought of harboring the Khalai on Shakuras. He claimed that slaying the Highborn Templar was a sacred act. And in demonstration of Protoss unity, a tribunal consisting of Protoss from both Ire and the Dark Templar would sentence Ulrasaj to imprisonment. This trial was interrupted by an attack of Terrans. Early in the attack, they would free Ulrasaj and his minions, who would steal a number of Khaitarian crystals before fleeing. Ulrasaj had created an alliance with Alon Shazar, and his scavengers, who had previously used Khaitarian crystal-based techniques to control a Cerebrate and thus an entire brood. Their plots included using warped Khaitarian crystals to control and mutate the Zerg until they could withstand the power of the Zelnaga Temple, and to use a powerful EMP generator during battle against the Protoss of Shakuras. Their plan would involve unleashing these enhanced Zerg upon Shakuras, which would cause the Templar to flee their hidden places, leaving the Protoss from Ire exposed to assault. However, the plan partially fell due to a combined Khalai and Dark Templar force destroying his warp crystals. Ulrasaj and Shazar would still try the second part of their plan, though, utilizing EMP generators to weaken the opposing Protoss forces, while Shazar's scavengers and the Fist of Ulrasaj to attack, but they would thus be defeated. Razagal, though, would be kidnapped by Kerrigan's minions when Talamatros was destroyed. Zeratul would travel in a carrier to Char al-Aleph, demanding to know why Razagal had been taken. Kerrigan would reveal that she stole Razagal to use as leverage in getting him and his brethren to kill the new Overmind for her. But Zeratul had reservations. He obeyed only when Razagal asked him to do it for the sake of the Protoss. Zeratul and his Dark Templar would go onto the surface of Char and would thus kill the new Overmind. That was being controlled by the UED. Zeratul would then demand that Kerrigan release Razagal at once. However, when Kerrigan asked if she wished to return to her people, Razagal would reply that she wished only to serve Kerrigan and remain at her side. Zeratul would thus realize that Kerrigan had corrupted Razagal's mind, explaining Altharis' earlier rebellion. Zeratul would circumvent Kerrigan's defenses and would rescue Razagal before regrouping with a number of protoss survivors on the surface of Char. But Kerrigan and her broods would close in before they would be capable of dimensional recall. Zeratul would deal Razagal a mortal blow, rather than let her be recaptured. In her last moments, Razagal would thank Zeratul for freeing her from Kerrigan's control and would name him the new leader of the Dark Templar. Feeling unfit to succeed Razagal, though, Zeratul would go into self-imposed exile. Following the death of Razagal, though, Mohindar was chosen to speak for the Nerazim on the hierarchy. He would support Artanis to lead the hierarchy, and though he initially was resistant, Artanis would accept. In the preceding years, leadership of the recombined protoss civilization fell to Hierarch Artanis, who struggled to maintain unity against the deep-seated distrust and resentment between the Khalai and the Nerazim. Razagal's name was frequently invoked to keep the peace. Wishing to preserve the old ways of the Nerazim, Matriarch Forazun had many disagreements with Artanis during debates in the Twilight Council. While the Nerazim were initially welcoming of the Khalai, their brethren's demand for resources would soon stir tensions. The prior Zerg invasion of their world would cause the Nerazim to become more battle-hardened. The Nerazim would combine their technologies, though, with those of the Khalai. The collaboration would produce astonishing new developments in the like of with the likes of the Void Raid and the Stalker. All of the Nerazim were counted as part of the Dalim, the United Protoss people. Internal tensions would lead to tribalism in both the Nerazim and the Khalai. Now, I'd like to take a quick break here. I'd just like to thank everybody who's been listening on here, who's shown interest in this. I'd love to hear from you all, whether it's through the comments or the Discord page that I have. I'm going to put the link down in the description and the description, maybe the show notes. I'll also include links to the podcast that will be on YouTube and both Amazon podcasts as well. So please get the Discord a follow. In there, you can talk about all the lore or the questions about the lore you have for StarCraft. You can just have general discussions in there. You can participate in polls I open up for what topics we'd like to discuss, or if you're excited for the new StarCraft tabletop miniatures game. Especially, I just would love to hear from the community who enjoys StarCraft, and I just would love to hear from you all. So please leave a like. Go ahead, follow and subscribe to this podcast if you want to. And, would love to hear from you all on the Discord. But thank you all for listening. Hopefully I can get some comments here on these episodes shortly, and I'd love to read them off. I don't know if I'm going to do a Patreon right now. Unfortunately, my work's a little bit too busy currently for me to try to get that started up and going. But if you all would like it, please let me know. I don't mind. I could try and figure stuff out with it. Might reach out to some other podcasters who I follow to see how they've done it. But anyways, let's get back into the rest of the show. Moving on into further history, we would go into the Second Great War. A lot of what we know comes from both the Legacy of the Void with the Dark Templar, but the Dark Templar also featured within the Wings of Liberty campaign. So, within the level Maw of the Void, a group of Dark Templar would be imprisoned by the Tal'Darim on a Zelnaga world ship in the Sigma Quadrant. They would offer to assist Draenor against the Tal'Darim if he released them, which they would. And this is during that bonus objective within there, which, hey, I always like getting free units. Within Children of the Void, as the Khalai would rebuild the Golden Armada with the intention of reclaiming Ire, tensions would rise between the Nerazim and Khalai Protoss. The Nerazim would begin to feel that Khalai's presence was eroding away at their culture, and that the Khalai's obsession with reclaiming Ire was causing unneeded misery upon the Nerazim. Forazun, the daughter of Razagal, was an outspoken critic of the Khalai and of Hierarch Artanis. Vorazun and Mohandar would get into verbal sparring matches, and she would view the aged Nerazim as a puppet of Artanis. Vorazun's activism would prevent the Khalai from mining the Nassar, a holy site for the Nerazim. An accident would occur where a squadron of phoenixes would collide with a Nerazim transport, killing 23 Nerazim civilians. Artanis did not attend their funeral, causing Vorazun to view Artanis as one who cared little of the Nerazim culture. Tensions would come to a heat when Vorazun's student, Talus, would seize control of the citadel with the intention of sparking conflict between the Khalai and the Nerazim, so that the Khalai would be repelled from Shakuras. Vorazun and Malhander would enter into negotiations with them before Executor Solemnis could raise the citadel with a squadron of zealots. Talus refused to back down, forcing Vorazun and Mohander to fight Talus and his followers. At first, they would attempt to take them down using non-lethal means, but Talus would thus kill Mohander. Vorazun would then fight Talus, killing him and ending the crisis. Later, Vorazun would meet with Artanis, stating he would carry out the funeral rites for Mohander. Talus was buried beside him as a sign of respect. Artanis would state that he would support Vorazun's ascension to matriarch, and Vorazun would agree that she would commit some of her forces to the upcoming invasion of Ire, but would state that she had to leave some of her forces behind on Shakuras. Vorazun's ascension to matriarch would later go through, making her ruler of the Nerazim. And there was a nice little conversation between Artanis and Vorazun about this. I'll kind of keep it brief and speak about it. We will preserve the traditions of the Nerazim. They will not be forgotten. In time, they may be. I feared losing our old ways, Artanis, but as we've worked with the Tal'Darim and the Purifiers, I now see that it is inevitable. Traditions must change as we do. A day may come when we leave behind the Shadow Wall, just as you have abandoned the Kala and the caste system. But we would move on into the events of the End War. The Nerazim would track the reclamation of Ire until they would be cut off, and the warp gate linking Shakuras to Ire was reopened. The Shadow Guard would be decimated by Hybrid and Zerg under the control of Amon, who would proceed to obliterate Shakuras' cities. Vorazun's Dark Templar would aid Artanis in clearing the infestation from the launch base in the southwest quadrant of Telematros, allowing Vorazun to complete the evacuation. The Nerazim would then fight alongside Artanis' warriors unto the destruction of Shakuras. Vorazun would send her most elite Dark Templar to scour the Kuprulu sector. They would track Mobius Core to their base within Revenskar. The Nerazim born on Shakuras would see ire for the first time when they came to strike at Amon, having only heard tales of their homeland. Vorazun would purge Antioch of the Sur with Tal'Darim Alarak, and would then send her Dark Templar to aid Artanis in the Selnaga caverns. The Nerazim would assist in destroying the void shards surrounding Amon's body, and would hold the northern entrance to the temple, where the keystone would be charged. In the aftermath of their victory, the Nerazim had successfully reclaimed Ire alongside their protoss brethren. In the months to come, Nerazim structures would be seen among those being rebuilt on Ire. When Artanis would lead the Dalim into the void for the final strike against Amon, they would be accompanied by Dark Templar, Stalkers, Annihilators, and Dark Archons. But they would still but after the defeat of Amon, the Nerazim would begin developing new technologies, including a drawing weapon named the Warp Disc. In addition, the Nerazim wished to observe their Terran neighbors to ascertain whether they would be a long-term ally or a future threat. With the blessings of Hierarch Artanis, the Nerazim would send a Dark Templar named Ulavu to both observe the Terrans and find how the telekinesis of their psionic ghosts could be used with the Warp Disc. As the rebuilding of Ire would commence, a cultural movement to artistically move back to the Protoss's ancient days of the Golden Age expansion would occur, something that would deeply disturb many Nerazim. When Khalai, Smith, and Craftsman redesigned Nerazim war machines, such as Stalkers and Oracles in the Khalai style, it was met with offense by many Nerazim. Some Dark Templar would throw their support behind the artistic movement and would embrace the Golden Age, their armor and armaments, but some Nerazim speculated that these warriors would bride. Matriarch Vorazun would refuse to comment on this movement, and was not officially recognized by the leadership of the Dalim. Meanwhile, Some Nerazim would see the Khalai as trying to reform the Nerazim to match their culture. The loss of the Khala would also spark some resentment between the two cultures, as the Nerazim had long adjusted to life without its guiding presence. Warzone, with the contention of United Dalim, would aid Novaterra later on in hunting down and helping recover rogue specters, seeing in their conflict a mirror of the conflict between the Khalai and the Nerazim in ages past. And that is unfortunately where we end our history with the Nerazim, who have been a big part of StarCraft story and of the Protoss as a whole, going on from rogues and exiles to becoming a founding member of a founding faction of the Dalim, a united Protoss tribe, once again. Granted, you still have the tensions in between both factions for their different cultures and how what they see. But, it's not all bad. A lot of them believe in uniting together. Matriarch Forzone, Saratol believed it before he unfortunately passed. So, but that's not all I have to talk about. There were different organizations within the Nerazim, mostly their tribes. Judging the total power of the Nerazim is almost impossible, for most are nomadic folk scattered across dozens of star systems in small ships and hidden enclaves. It's quite possible that their combined strength is enormous. Some of the different clans that were in there, you would have the Alisar, who within Kalani, I believe that's the language it's called, are a group of Dark Templar who would reside in the Alisariel on the moon of Elna. They would record and store the memories of Dark Templar in Darian crystals. Known for their strong discipline and unwillingness to change the way they do things, they spend much of their time moving memories from damaged or time-worn crystals to fresher ones. The Alisir are led by a protoss with the title Alisar Va, a term similar in meaning to head librarian. By 2503, the Alisar was critical. So, another tribe would be the Boros, who wear blank-faced helmets and protect themselves with heavy armor. You'd have the Lasana, who are distinguished by their wickedly curved warp blades that they wield and cloth shrouds on their faces. Interesting note about them, the Lanasa Dark Templar portrait model has a purple warp blade and purple eyes, while the Lanasa Dark Templar unit model has green warp blade and green eyes. You would also have the Sarajal, which currently is unknown if it's canon or not, due to it being a part of the StarCraft Ghost game, which is non-canon. Elements may be taken as flavor lore, however, and I kind of want to touch on it. The Sarajal seek to restore and maintain the balance and even the scales of justice throughout the galaxy. They would follow the shadow path, which would allow them to eschew traditional morality, to view themselves as forces of nature, and avatars of a concept known as the Reckoning. They have little in the way of compassion toward the Khalai. One can gain membership into the tribe by killing another member of the tribe, thus taking their place. The tribe operates out of the ship the Void Seeker, and the gas known as Terrazine is sacred to the Sarijal. In early builds of StarCraft Ghost, the Sarijal would track down Jackson Haller in his Terrazine mining operations on Fire. While there, a member of the tribe, Tanagaj, would challenge the Ghost agent Nova to a trial by combat and be slain. When Haller would betray Nova and leave her for dead, the Sarijal elder Zangakar would recover her, involving her in the tribe and would lead her to Haller's base on Jar. Finally, they would help Nova assault his base of operations at Gehenna Station with two of their members, Solara and Arakan, who would merge into a Dark Archon to kill the Spectre Vulcan. In the final encounter against Haller, Zangakar would be mortally wounded, but Nova was able to kill the Spectre leader. Zangakar would give her his sight blade and hoped she would find balance among the stars. Known members of this tribe is Elder Zangakar, Arakan, Kandalor, Tanajaz, Nova Terra with a tentative membership, and Solara. Uh, so, and the last tribe we know of would be the Seratai. Their warriors would be distinguished by the shadow size they wield and the heavy armor they wear. Their hunters frequently dress in Zerg bones, and these Dark Templar would be battle hardened due to the Zerg invasion of Shakurs, and some wear the bones as trophy. Now we know some of their lore through Heroes of Storm, so it might be canon, might not be. Since their arrival on Shakurs, the Zeratai were renowned as great hunters. For nearly a millennium, they would wander across Shakurs, fashioning intricate armors from the bones of their prey. A Zar-Tai skin for Zeratol named Zerg Hunter Zeratol is available in Heroes of Storms, though I don't think Heroes of Storm is still operating. Its description would make reference to the Zeratai. Artanis would also have an Nerazim skin tint named Zeratai within Heroes of the Storm. So, those are a few of the tribes we know of that were part of the Nerazim. But the Nerazim would also often operate within independent warbands. Known warbands include Dabiri's Shadow Company, which was a protoss mercenary warband led by Nerazim Master Dabiri. Despite the nature of its leader, it maintained high arbors in its rank. At some point after the Brood War, the Shadow Company would offer its services to Terran Dominion to help with the new Trinidad pirates. It also had the Fist of Urzaj, who was the rebel that tried to fight against the Nerazim and the Khalai. Its fate, though, is unknown. However, so some interesting notes. The fate of the Fist of Urzaj is unknown. However, Urzaj still had access to Nerazim, who acted as assassins for him, killing preservers. In gameplay, the Fist uses units from the conventional protoss tech despite being anti-Khalai in lore. And then last warband we know of would be Zeratol's warband, who would follow him in his adventures throughout the Brood War and when he was discovering the ancient prophecy. Notable Nerazim would include Matriarch Razagal, Matriarch Forzun, Prelate Mahandar, Prelate Zeratol, Nereth, and Urzaj. Uh, they'd also have some interesting technology as well, which I plan to go over at a later date, as most of them are units that are utilized within either StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2. Some of that would include the terrestrial portion of it, or the land base, which would be the Annihilator, the Centurion, the Catharian Monolith, a Shadow Scythe, Stalker, the Void Templar, Warp Blade, and Warp Disc. Their aerospace or spaceborne or airborne ships would be the Corsair, Nerazim transports, Oracles, Phase Prism, which would be the Shakur's variant of Warp Prisms, Scouts, which are different from the Khalai variant, Star Relic, and Void Rays. So, uh, after this, there are just a couple notes I'd like to speak on about the Nerazim, which the idea of making the Nerazim arms and armor predominantly platinum comes from the development of the Stalker, which was made platinum in order to distinguish it from similar circle-looking units. The concept, though, would be later applied to the Nerazim as a whole. The center of the Nerazim crest comes from the Sargas tribe symbol, possibly due to the fact that a large number of the Sargas tribe members would join the Nerazim during the Discord. In Heroes of the Storm, the Nerazim symbol is available as a banner and war banner. Nerazim skin tints are available for Phoenix, Proteus, and Templar Li Ming. And so that's everything we know about the Nerazim or the Dark Templar as of this moment. Additionally, I believe later on in the future there'll be a separate sub-faction within the Protoss as a whole, just like how the Khalai currently are under Hierarch Artanis. If they're going to be part of Dark Templar Prelates or Matriarch Forzun, I currently have no idea, but I can't wait to see them. And like I keep saying, I hope we learn more stories about the Dark Templar because they're so interesting. It's so different from the Protoss that we normally interact with. So, but I hope you all enjoyed this, going over the nice, dark, and mysterious faction of the Protoss that we know and love. And I hope you'll continue staying on. I'm thinking about getting another episode out this week. I know it's only it's Thursday for most of us, but I feel like I owe it to you guys for missing the last few weeks and not uploading a video or an episode, however you want to call it. But once again, hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all continue to listen. please hit me up in the Discord. Let me know what you all would like to see in there. Stick around for discussions or whatnot. I'd love to build this community out a whole lot more than it currently is. But in regards to all that, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for stopping by. And Intaro Adun to you all.